everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Olivia and I make content about veganism and animal rights activism. In a few months' time, it will have been about a year since I did my very first activism event. And in the time that I've been an activist and, been speaking out about veganism and about what's going on in animal agriculture, I've definitely learnt a lot about what makes good and effective activism, what doesn't, but also where I personally fit into this movement, with the skills and the attributes that I have. I'm, still by no means an expert. There are people that have done animal rights activism for much, much longer than I have. I guess I have some tips for people who maybe want to get into animal rights activism but don't quite know where to start. So firstly, I want to talk about skills and attributes. The reality is that not everyone is going to be an Earthling Ed or like a Joey Carbstrong type activist. And by that I mean people who are comfortable going out onto the street, engaging in quite confrontational styles of debate, and also going on TV and radio and, broadcasting a message to sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. Not everyone will be suited to this. I think it's important to work out what your skills are and what you enjoy doing, what you're good at, and often this could probably stem from what you like to do outside of activism. Or this may tie into, for example, what you studied at university or what you do in your day-to-day job. But the great thing is, if you're into filmmaking, you're into art or photography or graphic design, even if you're a vet or a lawyer or a doctor, there will be a space in this movement for you. And not only will there be a space for you, we also need all of these people doing all of these different types of activism in order for veganism to be a successful and growing movement. So to summarise, let your skills and your attributes and what you feel you're good at dictate which activism styles you try. Now, personally for me, I love speaking to people. I love communicating. I've always enjoyed doing like presentations in front of a crowd. That's never been something that's scared me or made me anxious. So for me, these were the obvious types of activism that I would do, going out onto the street, speaking to people, making YouTube videos. These talents and these things that I believe I'm good at have dictated which activism I've done and continue to do. So the next thing that you might want to consider is whether you are more suited to confrontational or non-confrontational forms of activism. So not everybody is very good with confrontation. I know many people whose worst fear would be going out onto the street and engaging people on a, highly charged emotive debate such as veganism. So if you are somebody who doesn't enjoy sort of direct confrontation, there are still many, many forms of activism that are more suited to you. For example, you could volunteer or work at an animal sanctuary. If you're into food and cooking or making recipes or baking, then you could share some of your favorite recipes online. You could make cooking videos. I think food is a very non-confrontational way, yet highly effective way to get through to people, because everybody likes great food. And of course, as mentioned earlier, you could use skills like art or photography or graphic design to make videos, make advertising campaigns, make posters. And if you have more of like a job that I would say doesn't easily transfer to veganism, then you could always work for a vegan charity or vegan organization. However, what I would say is that if you are somebody who would deliberately choose these, less confrontational styles of activism, this doesn't mean that you won't face more confrontational conversations in your life, because the reality is we live in a non-vegan world. The majority of the population still think that exploitation and animal slaughter for a sandwich is a normal thing to do. By virtue of the fact that we as vegans are still a minority in today's society, will mean that these confrontational situations are somewhat inevitable. Even if you're somebody who really, really hates this confrontation, do try and prepare for these types of situations, because they will happen. So how does one go about doing this? How do you go about becoming more comfortable with these confrontational situations? Well, what I did, and something that I continue to do, is I watch a lot of debates online. I watch a lot of Earthling Ed and Joey Carbstrong, and sometimes, if I'm really feeling it, I will actually write notes while the debates are going on, and I'll try and sort of write down what I feel the debater has done really well, where the conversation turned a corner, what techniques they've used, and all of these sort of things has helped me to become more confident. And of course, something that's been incredibly helpful is going out onto the street and actually having these conversations myself. It's all well and good just sitting there with your laptop, watching a vegan debate, but actually going out and being part of the debate makes you learn so much faster. The thing about talking to non-vegans about this topic is that most of the time we end up getting iterations of very similar questions. I'd say 90% of the time when I'm doing street outreach, the question is either one that I've heard before or one that's a very similar iteration of something I've seen or heard before. And we can actually use this to our advantage. If we build up a repertoire of, let's say, the 20 most common anti-vegan arguments. Actually, there's a really, really good document that Earthling Ed produced that I'll link in the description, and it is literally the most common anti-vegan arguments. And if you learn the facts that you might need to debunk them and how to do it in a clear and concise way, then it will make your job as a vegan activist so much easier. Again, regardless of whether you're doing the more confrontational or non-confrontational types of activism. I also like to talk a little bit about emotion. The topic of veganism and animal rights activism is an emotional topic. We are talking about suffering that is so large and so widespread that it's incomprehensible. And we have every right to feel passionate and emotional about what's going on. And we also end up talking to people that we love, our friends and our family. And we consider these people to be kind and compassionate, lovely individuals. But at the same time, when we bring this topic to them, the topic of veganism, it's almost like a brick wall, comes down and all logic and sort of moral consistency is thrown out of the window. So with the combination of all of these things, it makes perfect sense why this topic is so emotional and highly charged. But when we let this emotion and this passion get too much, then it can be actually unproductive and we can actually lose control of the situation. We can become no longer calm, we can lose that level-headedness that we need in order for these conversations to be productive. But at the same time, we do need some of this emotion, we need this passion to come across because it helps us remain motivated, and it also helps us show non-vegans that this is an important and emotive topic that they should also be concerned about. I think this also plays into the longevity of activism. And by that I mean, if you have, for example, a year where you are letting your emotions dictate this activism and almost all conversations become heated, screaming matches where you feel like you're not getting through to people, this can just lead to burnout. You can start thinking, nobody's ever going to change, nobody's ever going to be receptive to what I have to say, so what's the point in doing it anyway? This is not what we want. The animals need us to be long-term activists. They need us to be going out there time after time again, and the way that we can achieve this is by getting this balance of passion and emotion right. So the obvious question is then how? How do we do this? How do we learn to keep our emotions under control? And I would say the obvious answer to this is just practice. I have had numerous conversations, not as much now, but I definitely used to, where at the end of the conversation, I just was quite upset with myself and disappointed because I felt that I hadn't represented the movement in a way that I wanted to. I'd let my emotion and my passion come before a effective way of questioning someone. It definitely takes a few really, unproductive conversations to make us think and reflect about why those conversations were unproductive and how we can prevent the same thing from happening in the next time. If you're somebody who's a bit more like me and you don't mind more confrontational and direct forms of animal rights activism, then there's still so many options. You could do street debates, you could do Cube of Truth or Train to Change type things where you stand in the street with a screen, or you do leafleting. There are lots and lots of organisations such as We the Free who will set up these groups and you just have to go along and join. You don't even have to set the group up yourself in most cases. There'll be one fairly near to you and you can just join and go along and learn. What I've learned recently is that even within this sphere of confrontational activism, there are still so many different things depending on what you feel comfortable doing. For example, there are non-violent direct activism organisations such as Animal Rebellion, and with these organisations you do something like a sit-in in a restaurant or like a public disruption, or there's lots of different things. Again, these can be very, very effective and something I would like to try in the future, but the risk of these is that you could end up being arrested. So obviously not everybody can be arrested. There are certain people who depend on them and can't just, get arrested one day. What you will decide to do will also depend on what's available in your local area, which organisations are active, and usually they'll have either a Facebook group or a WhatsApp chat or a Telegram chat, and it's very easy to just get added to the chat and then come along to one of the events. Something that I did during my time at school was I approached my head of year and I asked him if I could do a presentation to my year group. And I was allowed to. I prepared and delivered a 40-minute presentation about veganism and about the effects of the animal agriculture industries. And it was just one of the best things that I've ever done. And I was actually invited back to do it again for the next year, and I've now been invited back to do it again. So this is one presentation that's turned into 3 presentations. And by the end of this year's one, I will have probably spoken to somewhere in the region of 500-600 17 and 18-year-olds, which is amazing when you consider like the numbers of people that I've managed to influence. And many places of education, universities, colleges, schools, they're always looking for people who are passionate about something to come in and talk. And many schools actually have lecture programs where they will look for external speakers to deliver a presentation. So fire off some emails, see what happens. You might be lucky and you might be able to get a couple of gigs. You do not need to know everything before you start animal rights activism. I wish somebody had said this to me earlier, and I still feel like a lot of people hold themselves back and are reluctant to start doing activism because they feel like, okay, I don't know everything about the industry and there might possibly be a few things that stump me and questions that I can't answer and arguments that I can't debunk. Please do not be put off by these types of thoughts. No one is going to be perfect and know everything and know how to debunk every argument at their first street demo or their first debate. If all successful activists had waited until they had a foolproof and extensive knowledge of the industry before they started doing activism, nobody would have started, because this doesn't exist and it takes time to build up this repertoire of knowledge and debate skills. I think the best thing I could say about this is just do it. Just get out there, get in touch with your local groups and just go for it, because the world doesn't need a very small number of perfect activists. What it actually needs is a very large number of imperfect activists who are just committed to learning and growing and getting better with time. There are countless times where I've come back from a demo or an activism event and thought back to the conversations that I've had with people on the street and thought, oh, I really wish I'd have said this differently, or I really wish I'd have used this line of argument rather than this one. But this is part of the learning process, and like anything in life, you have to make these mistakes so that you learn and get better and you don't make the same mistakes again. And you will actually catapult how quickly you can learn debate styles and learn how to speak to people and grow in confidence by actually being there and doing it and getting first-hand experience much quicker than you would, sitting at home on your laptop watching online debates or reading about the industry. You will learn so much faster being out there and actually getting involved. It's also worth noting that some organisations, I know We the Free does, offer free training sessions beforehand. So if you really feel like you want to prepare before your first demo, then definitely search on the organisation's website whether they offer some sort of free training. Whether you love it or whether you hate it, it cannot be denied that social media is a really powerful and important tool in promoting social justice movements such as veganism. Even before I started posting about veganism on my Instagram account, I already had 700 followers. That's 700 different individuals that I had the power to influence with the click of one button. So start posting, start making reels, start making Instagram stories, and just, start sharing the message on these platforms. Something I say is, if you were one of the victims trapped in these industries, how vocal would they want the people that are standing up for them to be? And chances are they would want them to shout the message from the rooftops. So do everything that you can, use your social media profiles and get the message out there. Online, there are always going to be trolls. There are always going to be people who don't like what you're saying and will find every excuse, literally every excuse in the book, no matter how illogical and immoral and unaligned with their true morality. They will use these excuses to try and discredit veganism and to try and justify eating an exploited being for a sandwich. Once you sort of accept that these people are online and they will always be online, and it's just sort of a part of the experience, you develop this thicker skin to it, and this is something that I'm learning still every single day. Also, be careful with comments on social media. often I have found myself being sort of sucked into a wormhole of negative comments, especially in like the deep comments of Instagram posts. And it's really harmful for me and my mental health, and it never makes me feel good. So I've had to become more disciplined with myself. I've had to often stop and say to myself, Olivia, this is not productive. You're not going to feel good by reading these people's bullshit online. Just stop. So please do be disciplined with yourself. And if you know something is going to be bad for your mental health online, just don't read it. Just don't look at it. So one of the final things that I would recommend any person who's interested in vegan activism to do is to volunteer at a local animal sanctuary. My family and I did this last year. We did it around Christmas time. We went to a local sanctuary called Dean's Farm, and we just spent a day mostly like mucking out, meeting the animals, stroking them, getting to know them, and it was so impactful. And I think the reason it was so impactful is because it reinforced to me what I'm doing this for. Who are the victims of this movement? The vegan movement is primarily about reducing suffering for trillions of animals across the globe. And just like other social justice issues, there are victims involved. And unfortunately, these victims are purposefully hidden from most of society. We don't get to meet pigs, cows, chickens in the same way that we understand and love dogs and cats and other more companion animals. By volunteering at the sanctuary, it really reinforced to me what I was doing this for, who I was doing this for. We don't need a very small number of perfect activists. We need a very, very, very large number of imperfect ones. We need activists who are willing to learn and improve their skills as time goes on, and be willing to commit both their time and their energy into the movement, and who are going to be doing that for a long time, who aren't going to do it for a year really intensively and then just burn out, but people who are really willing to do this for as long as it needs to be done. Everyone in their own sphere with their own talents can make a difference in this movement. And for veganism to be a successful and growing movement, we need everybody. We need the Earthling Eds, but we also need people who are willing to run animal sanctuaries, edit slaughterhouse footage, produce vegan documentaries, and are also out on the street speaking to people. If you can deal with the negatives of social media, then definitely do use it, and use it as a force for good, because if nothing else, it's a great technology to get one message to a lot of people very, very quickly. And finally, if you have the option to, definitely go and volunteer at an animal sanctuary. Not only is it incredibly rewarding, but it really puts into perspective why you're doing what you're doing and the reason that you want to keep going. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more from me, then please do subscribe and follow my Instagram, olivethevegan. I post lots of reels on there. So yeah, thanks for listening.